Hello, family members. I hope you're having a good day today. Um, I have something that I want to talk about that is a little unfocused, I'll admit. And I keep thinking about thought experiments that I have. Okay. So I feel like copyright is no longer relevant in the modern society. That copyright is only used by corporations to protect themselves from other corporations or from us, from the consumer, and is used against the consumer, but rarely protects small creators. For example, in H. Bomber Guy's big old plagiarism video, he talks about how there just really aren't that many cases of somebody being caught plagiarizing, being sued, than being held accountable for their actions. It just doesn't really work like that. And if copyright is only being used to enrich the already rich and powerful, then maybe we just don't need it anymore, you know? Maybe we need to figure out how to have a society that's sort of post-copyright. So then, I continue my thought experiment about what would that look like? What would be the incentive for creators to create for large corporations, because the thing is, a lot of media that is created for commercial purposes is not what the artisans creating it would choose to make if they could just make whatever they wanted. I don't think there's too many writers that would choose to write some of the garbage, cash grab type movies, for example, that if they didn't have to in order to get paid or try to build their resume or whatever. So where would the incentives lie? And so I think there would still be incentives for writers to contract with big studios and be paid for their work all at once, all up front, before they're even given the finished product, right? In order to get the finished product, which then is not copyrightable, they would need to pay the artisan. Then the artisan is not not at the mercy of whatever comes next as far as commission or whatnot. I mean, the fact of the matter is, since the Napster days, it's always been possible to get basically any kind of media that you want for free if you were willing to go out of your way enough to do it. We have been living in a copyright-free world, except for where, large business interests decide to, flex their muscles around on somebody else that's smaller than them they think they can push around, squeeze and shake down for a little cash. What? Just stop that, right? So that to me seems like a pretty sensible starting point in my thought experiments of what an ideal world would look like. And I think all of this, trying to kind of figure things like that out, is how I kind of am working through my own midlife crisis, as it were. 42, chronically ill, sitting around with not much to do except for think. My midlife crisis is playing out as like a existential crisis simultaneously. I think part of it is I've been watching a lot of like real lefties on YouTube, and when you really think about it, you don't, you never, I never really heard lefties on anything. Growing up, like the Democrats were pretty conservative, and the conservatives, the Republicans were very, very conservative, right? And there really wasn't any strong real leftist, real like serious about ending capitalism and having a real socialist revolution, or people who are even not that extreme, but somewhere in between Democrat and a true leftist, and there's a lot of room there. And I've started hearing voices all along that spectrum, and it's really made me kind of re-examine where my own beliefs lie, because there was more that I didn't know, I wasn't hearing, because it's not, monetizable. It's not gonna show up on mainstream TV, because who's gonna pay for it? Like, leftists aren't exactly the type of people who are like, let's collect up all of our money and start a Fox News of our own kind of thing, I mean, I didn't really understand how, I would say not, somewhere between conservative and not really, MSNBC has a lot of Republicans on it, like a lot of Republicans on it. And that's a kind of strange thing, right? Like their lead morning show, like the face of their network in a lot of ways, is this Republican guy who says some pretty conservative stuff. I mean, he's not a modern day Republican. He's not like that extremely radical right, but he's still right, like. And now that I actually have access to voices that are left on mainstream cable, it kind of made me understand my own place, my own worldview better, I really, I think that if we want to call ourselves the greatest country on earth, if we really want to believe that, I don't understand how the greatest country on earth could have people starve but throw away food at the same time, have buildings of empty apartments and condos and empty suburban houses, but homeless, unhoused people. I don't know how we can call ourselves the greatest nation on earth and not have safe drinking water everywhere, or, adequately funded school systems. And there's just too many of society's problems that go back to poverty. I was listening to something the other day about how poverty is a traumatic experience and it caused mental illness. And then you look at people who are unhoused, who are there because they're mentally ill, because they grew up in poverty that traumatized them. And it's just like, wow, we have failed as a nation, if that's possible. Then we would allow people to grow from infancy in such traumatizing, horrible poverty that it permanently scars them to the point that they're unable to function in society. And then we allow them to end up living unsheltered with unstable food supply, no medical care, or very dubious access to medical care. That's a failed society to me in a lot of ways, you know. And so I don't see how you can fix that, how you can truly address the root cause of so many of our problems without eliminating poverty. And I don't see how you could eliminate poverty without a UBI. Because the fact of the matter is, there are not enough high-paying jobs in this country for everybody to live comfortably. There are a whole lot of part-time jobs, service jobs, vastly underpaid jobs out there. And even if we start paying teachers a fair wage, and civil servants a fair wage, firefighters a fair wage, nurses and techs and all the people who do like a lot of the real hands-on work in healthcare a fair wage. Even when we do that, we can't, there's just not enough good jobs. And if we want to have a consumer culture, a culture that is always defined on consumer growth and growth in GDP and all that, well, I think that we need to give a little bit of stimulus to our consumer base. It would help our economy greatly to have consistent access to capital in our hands, in the consumer class's hands, so that we can feed it into the machine, right? Like, that's just like priming the pump. If you think about it, it's trickle up economics, basically, because that's the way it really works in a pyramid scheme. Capital trickles up, not down, okay? So just like play into it. Like, UBI to me just seems like reasonable. And public health care just seems like reasonable, because I feel like things like education and rehabilitation and healthcare, things that are essential functions of government, of society, that people need in order for the society to function properly. You need an educated electorate. You need to have consequences for, law breaking, although that's something we definitely need to reform as well. We need to have, health care for people, mental health care, physical health care, dental health care, eye health, all of that. People need access to that stuff. Need, not want. It's not something that should be available to some and not to others. People shouldn't be dying in the greatest country on earth of completely preventable causes because of want of money. That's disgusting. That's like, I know there's a lot of people that say that they're Christians that are against that. And I'm like, how Christ-like is this? To not want to make sure that this, feed the hungry, treat the sick, clothe the, the poor, house those who are unhoused. Like, those are very Christ-like principles. And here we have all these people saying they're Christians that don't do that. And it just like, it's an interesting choice. I'll go with that. Call me Boo Boo. That's Mama's Boo Boo. But, Then okay, so we got uh, no copyright. We got UBI. We got um, everybody gets health care. Everybody gets housing. Let's throw that in. Then what happens in society? What motivates people, you know? And the thing is, maybe we do some sort of hybrid of a capitalist system, give people who want to have something to work towards and to go chase in that way, give them an outlet for that expression, because there clearly are a lot of people who that is their life choice. That's what they want out of their life, is to build wealth. And if they're gonna exist, they're gonna exist. Whether we consider what they do a vice or not, they're gonna exist. So let's give them a way to exist that's not harmful to the rest of us, okay? And allow there to be, you know, corporations still, that they can be titans of industry, and that there can still be private sector innovation and things like that. But let's not only have that, you know. This like trend towards privatization is just horrifying, because that means that if a company fails, that essential services can be out of the picture, and that's not good. That's like sort of the opposite of good. You know, kids need good school. You know, it's more important now than ever for people to learn how to, you know, good reading comprehension. You know, how to research and to verify the credibility of information, how to spot scams, you know. All of that stuff, all that analytical stuff is part of what you get in school. People want to always denigrate, you know, different topics in school because they don't think that's necessary for people to learn. But the fact of the matter is, it's all about the process of learning to learn. It's not necessarily just what you learn in school. And once you know how to learn, it's that same thing as that teach a man how to fish. He can eat forever. If you just give him a fish, that doesn't work. You know, like we need to, again, be priming the pump. Like if we invest in the right places, if we put our energy in the right places, which would be in the consumer class, in children, in education, you know, we could really make huge strides. And but then you have to think, we live in a democracy, and one of the principles of the democracy is that it is we the people. What do the people want? And so what is the responsibility of people like me who thinks that these policies make sense and would make everybody else's lives better, as well as my own, to be frank? Well, then, is it my job then to convince the populace to help other people come to the same conclusions I have? And then once we get to the point where that's what the majority of people want, we find some way to implement those policies. Yes, I think that's the way it should be, but that's not the way it is. Our system right now doesn't allow for that. It doesn't matter that the majority of people want X policy. If it can't get through this Congress, it can't get through that Senate, it can't get signed by that president. You know, there's just all this like weirdness that's keeping us from coming to a reasonable compromise on any particular policy based on what we know right now, not what's been done traditionally, but what we actually know works in reality based on all available information. And we need to have a government that is responsive enough to actually respond to updates in the way that people look at different policies, at different economic conditions. Our government is way too slow to update anything related to cost of living increases, minimum wage increases and things like that. It's just too slow. It's too sluggish. The system is too sluggish. It's too much. And I think that part of the reason for that is there's too much time spent by politicians worrying about getting elected. And so, serious electoral reform is necessary in order to be able to get anything, done, really. What's the easiest way to do that? Of course, everyone talks about ranked choice voting, and I think that's a very easy to implement, very good first step. Because what that's going to do is it's going to make it a lot easier for people to come through that aren't aligned with the particular, party necessarily, so we can get different types of candidates otherwise wouldn't be able to go through. But it's also going to eliminate the most extremist candidates, because if they are, maybe a lot of people's number one, but everybody else's number five or whatever, they're not going to go through, right? And so that's going to breed out some of the extremists, and that's the problem. Is a lot of what goes on in national level of politics, well, all levels of politics these days, is manipulation and gamesmanship, and it's a lot about theater and putting on a good show. I was watching the YouTuber Ethan is Online, who I think is a very interesting young man. I love watching. But I must say that there was a take on Biden that just kind of cracked me up, because there was oh, you said all this stuff about bipartisanship, and look where it got you. It got you impeached, and it got your son investigated and charged and convicted and all this stuff and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, that would have happened no matter what he did. The reason that Joe Biden had the impeachment inquiries against him was because Trump was impeached. He wanted it to have the false equivalency. He wanted to have reasonable plausibility for the false equivalency between the two parties, and say, well, I've been impeached, but so was he, but they could never really get it done. And so they just randomly impeached Mayorkas. That's just it's so silly, but it's just also so pointless and such a waste of our time and money and, electoral process. We go through all this stuff for you guys to play these games and do this theater and introduce these articles of impeachment that are never going to go anywhere at all, because there's no basis for them. It's all about playing games and trying to find a way to sneak back into the White House and never leave. It's so depressingly open, and it's working, and it's just it's not great. I'll give it that. It's just not great. Can't recommend it. But I do think it's possible. We can get ranked choice voting. Maybe we can break some of this spiraling, dysfunction. Because that's really what it is. It's become a negative feedback loop, and it just keeps getting worse and worse, and they keep getting more and more extreme. And in response, only remaining sort of semi-functional political party, the Democrats, keep getting yanked further to the right, so that the actual, progressive policies that should be the left parties can't even be touched because they're too extreme, because the Democrats are center right. Like from an ideological perspective. And don't get me wrong, I am actually a Democrat, and I do actually support a lot of Democrats, and I think, probably way more conservative than I ever realized. But I've also realized that I've become more progressive and less conservative in the process of realizing how conservative I was, which is like a very interesting thing to realize about yourself, right? This is what a midlife crisis looks like for a millennial. A millennial nerd, I'll say. Like, I kind of thought I was a punk rocker when I was a kid. I mean, I kind of was. I went to punk shows and listened to punk music, and I mean, I did have tattoos, and I did have piercings until I got sick and I can't wear them anymore. But I mean, I don't think it was ever that cool. I was always a nerd. I mean, like, I was into anime back before I could even get it in West Virginia, and I had to settle for like trying to find some random dub of something at some weird time of the day. Oh gosh. Or like really expensive graphic novels, Sailor Moon graphic novels from like the next county over in some weird random shop. Oh my gosh. I had the back in the day millennial experience, right? And I was still a nerd. It wasn't like it is today where it's all like easy to find fan fiction, all this stuff. Nah. I was like, let me go out of the way to be a big old nerd. Not be cool. I like that about myself. I do, though, I don't know how to be anything other than like a pretentious, pedantic, verbose, overthinking weirdo, And I can't help but want to be pacifist and, collective, taking care of everybody. But I also am like, I don't think that we need a revolution. I just think that we need to get back on the road to doing better. I don't think that this country can ever be better. There's always going to be competing interests and differing ideals. But we need like people who are actually operating on good faith and not just engaging in very complex power grabs. It's just, I mean, we need to maybe even the thing that we need to do is stop it being a person that you vote for, but rather a platform, because I think that makes it a lot easier to not get so focused on a particular person and their scandals. If they have to step aside, then fine. That doesn't harm the greater party. So it would give greater incentive to call foul, to not tolerate behavior that was somewhat unacceptable because it would, complicate the whole system or whatever, There's far too many things that are just determined on weird technicalities. And when you're talking about something that results in humans losing their lives, that's unacceptable. It shouldn't be just that arbitrary. I don't know. I feel like there is reason to believe that things could be better. I think there's reasons to believe that everything is messed up and it's all too depressing. I feel like there's reason to believe like things are always messed up and we always just lionize the past or maybe lionize the future. Or even lionize the present and hide that from ourselves. We love to live in denial, don't we? I think that our long ramble about some of my thought experiments and my musings is probably enough for my little midlife crisis video here that I'm making. So I guess I'll leave it at that. But take care of yourselves, family members. If there's anyone watching after this, you get like 1.5 million stars, okay? Take care. Bye.